announced World Championship candidates between Kleerkast and opperwezen. Both are Dutch guys, opperwezen being the former world champion. And a favorite in this match also. But I expect some spectacular play because they are both very creative players. If we take a look at the calendar, we will see that tomorrow Katask is playing Burpcow, and pre-tournament favorite Katask is also playing on Saturday, when we have no less than 3 matches going on. Burpcow is playing Dog Answer, and Bugzilla is taking on Zixon, so it will be a Bughouse feast on Saturday, and it continues on Sunday when Zixon plays Burpcow and Jan Lee is playing Kleerkast. So let's take a quick peek at the overall standings. We see Blitzbullet at the top, but he's been really busy. He only has 4 matches remaining, and he will not have anything to do with the outcome of the tournament. Second place opperwezen could be a contender for the first place, as could Jan Lee in third place. But the tournament favorite is Katask still, and he has not played so many matches yet. So let's see if the players are ready. I see that opperwezen is online and also Kleerkast. Let's follow opperwezen. Do we have any viewers? 1 viewer so far. Sorry about that. And hopefully the players are getting ready. And Kleerkast at 2561, opperwezen at 2653. So 100.80 advantage for opperwezen. They should be ready to start any minute. Hello there, Gingerbread. You beat me, you bastard, in our last game, didn't you? Well, you deserved it. So, do we have any predictions for this match? Anyone in the chat who has any predictions? Who will win this, and what will be the margin? Sorry, I don't want to play right now. Well, I predict that opperwezen, he wants a big win here. Maybe he won't be able to do 10-0, but I'm thinking maybe 8-2 in favor of opperwezen. He has to build. Yes, you did. I mean, no, you didn't. You did. I'm thinking maybe opperwezen will win by 8-2. 7-3 sounds reasonable also. But opperwezen has to gather a lot of points before the tough matches against Jan Lee and Katask. And as you can see, if we look at opperwezen, he has beat 264 Brock by 6.5, 3.5. He beat Blitzbullet 6-4, Dog Answer by 8-2, and Mario Orton 9-1. Kleerkast has lost against Blitzbullet 2-8. Wait, did he beat Burp Cow 8-2? Yes, he did. Burp Cow 2. Or is this... I'm just a bit confused. I am old has-been on leeches. So Kleerkast has lost against the finisher 2-8. He beat Burp Cow 8-2, very impressive. Beat Variants only 6-4 and beat Dog Answer 7-3. So he's on the upper half and still no action. So maybe you're some other gingerbread man then. I have played one gingerbread dude a lot of times, and he finally beat me. Okay, that explains me. That explains it. Yeah. Okay. So someone else beat me. Hi there. Okay. And hopefully we'll see some action really soon here. Yeah, the players are set, and as you can see, they have played each other quite a few times. Opperwezen in the lead by 143 versus 41. And we will be looking from the view of opperwezen. Kleerkast starting with d4, and he likes to fianchetto his kingside bishop. I think we will see that. Both players having a really broad opening repertoire, and I hope we'll see some surprises here. Apparently opperwezen isn't quite ready yet. And off we go. I've seen opperwezen playing quite conservatively as black against the fianchetto setup, and so much for opening preparation. He starts thinking on the second move. Oh, well, maybe it was just getting set up. So black is just developing normally here. And this is some really interesting play here. White probably wanted to trade the bishop for the... not for the bishop. Especially after black has castled. So black dances around with the bishop and waits with castling a bit. But this way white won on tempo with the h2, h3 move, which is usually quite useful. Quickly trading here on f6. This looks like preparation. So if the bishop goes to g6, white trades it. Kleerkast was playing this in an earlier match, I think. But opperwezen seemed to be prepared there. He traded a piece for 2 pawns. And some interesting play here. Well, the queen probably needs to go back. Yeah, and e7 is a nice square. Curious why my window is jumping back and forth. So this is hoping to maybe sacrifice on g7. Also it's threatening g7 and also threatening c7. And black comes up with a counter threat, threatening pawn at f3. And white doesn't have any blockers in hand, so it's not too easy to meet this threat of pawn at h3. So as Kleerkast often does, he goes on the attack. Attack is the best defense. Black does have some problems here on the dark squares long term. Yeah, I will try to fix this a little bit. It's that funny little bug. So, welcome everybody. So white is threatening to just pick up a pawn here and place it on f6. That's why the king goes into the corner. Because now it takes 2 moves to get to the king. Silly little window. Jumping back and forth here. And white does want those pawns for the f6 and g7 squares. And the question is, will the white's forces be depleted before he can finish the attack? The black king doesn't have much cover here, but on the other hand, look at the black pieces that he has in hand, so he can't afford to waste some material. And now maybe he has the idea of knight at f3 perhaps, although this bishop is covering h2. And white will need not only a diag here, but he will need either a rook for the, or a heavy for the corner, or a knight at h6. and opper being really, really low here. I don't think bishop at h6 for black is a good idea, because white will play bishop at g7 and trade those bishops, and then the bishop will land on f6 probably. Looks dangerous. I think maybe black will allow the white forces to enter the dark squares somehow, but white can pick up that knight anytime he likes. So when it takes on f3, there is a mating threat on h6 here. So that was more or less for free. So this covers the h7 square. Kleerkast looking in great shape here. Probably just take on g6 and place the bishop on g2 and be happy. Oh. So you need to move the king, yeah. You couldn't take the bishop because of pawn at f3, and the king is close to getting mated. And now the players are down to the last seconds. This attacks h6 and covers h2, and opperwezen just oversteps the time limit. Kleerkast took that. 1-0 Kleerkast. And I'm not sure about the final position. Probably Kleerkast was winning. Let's have a quick look at the final position. Was there anything for black? Yes, there was. Black was much better. Ouch. Bad game for opperwezen. And let's go back to watching opperwezen. So what happened here? We saw a fianchetto, but for black this time. And even though he spent the tempo going back, now he takes on f6 and he's going for the d5 pawn here. And black reacts by pinning the knight. And this looks like some huge light squares holes here. And that knight that black has in hand won't be much of a help when he wants to defend later. Hi there, Zaraza. So look at all those pieces on the dark squares here for black, which means it's weak here on the light squares. Maybe one idea for white is to simply go with the knight up the board. This pins the e pawn, so d4 might be hanging at some point. So white prefers to go this way, maybe f4 next. Although this gave black the opportunity to put his knight on h4, which is an excellent square. Now, I was about to say I wouldn't be surprised if it took here, but maybe I would be surprised, because if white takes here, it's simply too weak on g6, I think. The knight wanted to go this way, but then the light squares would have been too weak. So this opens up for the queen, covering f3 at least. And also he was attacking d5. So this move puts great pressure here on this diagonal, forcing black to interpose with the knight. I don't see anything else. And once black places this knight here, white could probably just go queen h5. So, and that would have been really, really bad for black. So black just tries to randomize a bit, throws the knight at the white king position, but black doesn't have enough here, I think. So if the queen takes, you have knight at h4 forking these pieces, and you cannot go back because of knight h3, and it's mate in next move. And the same applies to king h1, bishop g2, and then knight h3. So what do? Do you go up the board? But king g3 and then knight h5, and then what? Maybe you just knight h5, king h4, and you pick up the knight. Black doesn't have much pieces left. And when the attack is over, the game is over. So black tries to bring the h pawn to the feast here. White quickly places his knight on the board, and probably something like h4 will provide enough cover for the white king. h4 puts a stop to the black h-pawn and also blocks the h4 square, and the white king can maybe retreat. So this move is attacking the bishop and also provides cover for the white king, who can now take on f3 even. Before there was bishop at g4. This works fine as well. So simply just take this pawn, and now the king has a safe route over here. And white can afford to give the queen even, but he's being a bit brave here with the king, but it's no danger. As I said before, black doesn't have enough pieces. What about bishop here now? No, it's nothing. So black is realizing his attacking days are over, and now it's white's turn. So maybe bishop here, yeah. Trading off the important defender on g6, and this is all over pretty soon. Checkmate. So 1-1. And Kleerkast seems determined to keep repeating his kingside fianchetto shadow line with both white and black. And we see the same line here. The bishop dancing around, avoiding to be traded. And white won the last time, although opperwezen had a great position at, I was about to say at some point, but probably a very large chunk of that game. And in the end he was probably winning also. So still the same line, the repeating, and opperwezen had a piece sacrifice prepared here, taking on e2. And he repeats it. So picking up 2 pawns for that piece. That game went bishop g3, queen e7, and then bishop e5. After bishop e5 and bishop h7, though, white was more or less forced to sacrifice on g7. It gave him some long-lasting chances, attacking chances on the dark squares. But it seems like black had more than enough resources to defend. And we saw pawn at e5, yeah, still repeating the same line. And the king went into the corner. So it looks like both players were happy about their first game. The king went into the corner and white sacrificed here on d5, I think. So basically the players have both thought about almost a minute just repeating the moves from the first game here. So this is a super sharp position. White has sacrificed some material, a piece, and he has an initiative, giving up the queen. Still the same moves as in that game. Now white needs a diag here, he has that already, and either a knight for h6 or a heavy for h8. So a nice little theoretical discussion here between the players. White is figuring his attacking chances are more worth than the pieces he sacrificed, and black thinks it's a bluff maybe. So now white got the heavy from f8, but what happens here? Because if you take with the rook, the king might well get mated here in the corner by a diag and a rook. And you cannot really run this way, because a pawn here and a rook on f8 or h8 will be made also. He decides it's safer to stay in the corner, and I think it's a wise decision. Let's say you take on d5 and black takes and the pawn here, you can defend with a knight on g6. But there is the problem with bishop takes f3 then, getting a knight for h6 as well. Or maybe I'm just delirious here. So this queen comes in as a great defender here of g7, and now you have threats like queen taking h3 and the other queen capturing, and there's a mate on g2. So white doesn't have the time to put the pawn on g7. Yeah, opperwezen is living on the edge here. But I think he found a really strong move in queen h6. Because I don't see a reasonable way to cover h3 here. Well, if you put the blocker on h2, then you don't have the pawn for g7. That would give white the time to pick up the knight, maybe. And Kleerkast found a clever way to defend here. I just don't see how black is supposed to defend against the heavy on h8. Wow! Very tense game there. And Kleerkast winning again. So opperwezen switching to something very untheoretical here. Avoiding the Kleerkast pet line. And we have a comment here from opperwezen. Next time I avoid it though, since I'm not good in defending. He thinks this line is good for black. The one we just saw. And that's obviously why he repeated the line, but he says he's not good enough to defend the position. So this is completely different. And black has a very sound reaction here to the white opening, just putting his pawns here in the center, grabbing some space, putting the queen in front of the king, covering a lot of squares, and also the black king has great freedom. Black needs to hang on to this pawn so this long diagonal won't get opened. White finding an interesting pawn sacrifice sacrifice here. Maybe the pawn. Does he play pawn c5? Yeah. And well, the bishop needs to go back. And maybe you simply take on e5, do you? Knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and then what? Bishop here or here? No. Yeah, it's usually easier to attack than to defend, actually, in Crazy House. White wants one more pawn for d6. And then the pawn will start to wreak havoc here in the black position. No, he doesn't suck at c-house. So some really interesting opening play here by both players. Black hoping to play knight at c2. And white just ignores it. He was anticipating bishop f5, and after knight c2, white will simply give his queen probably. And then does he push the pawn forward? Yeah. And white strikes first, gaining a lot of momentum here for his pieces. Maybe bishop c5 with tremendous pressure here on the long diagonals. Bishop c5 would provide a beachhead here on d6, also for a knight. For knight check. And obviously the pawn on e5 is hanging as well. Although taking on e5 would have been slightly more dangerous because of the b2 square where a pawn could land. Maybe pawn c7, queen takes, and bishop takes e5. I'm curious about that. Oh well, this knight check looks good. You cannot go to f8 or e7 because of knight takes b7, just picking up the queen. So you need to go either here or give the queen back. But giving the queen back with an unsafe king like this doesn't seem like a good idea, but king here, the knight can join, and this is looking bad for black. So the question is, do you really want to pick up the f7 pawn? Because that is keeping the king from going back. This looks much better. Check on the king, you can pick up the queen and just resigns. Great success there for opperwezen's probably a bit improvised opening. So Kleerkast actually switching to e4 here. That was a bit of a surprise, since opperwezen had promised not to repeat the line in the previous two games. But maybe Kleerkast didn't see that comment. Although this is more or less the same. Opperwezen allowing a strong attack. Maybe the position is just fine for black here, I'm not sure. But black will need to navigate through some really muddy waters here. This is looking difficult for black. Really difficult. I mean, a simple move like you could just put the queen on the e file maybe. I have no idea about the opening theory in this line. Looks like something that could potentially be disastrous for black. And do you pick up the rook, or do you go queen takes g6 and take the knight? Well, actually, you were trolling again. I think he's probably a bit underrated, opperwezen, at his 2600. So a lot of threats here for white. He threatens to put the rook here and pick up the knight. Or put the rook here on the last rank, putting pressure here. And once the queen leaves h8, you can just put a pawn on h7 and queen it. So a lot of interesting options here for white. I don't think he's 2800, but probably a 2700 player if he just puts his mind to it. I don't think he really cares about his rating actually. So this makes sense. You have a square for the king and you're protecting the bishop, and potentially you have some threats against the white king. Well, maybe just there are stronger players now playing bullet. Magnus Carlsen wasn't playing a few years ago, wasn't he? Wow, inviting a discovered check here by the knight. But is there a good discovered check? You would want to play something like knight check here, rook here, take the rook, and then mate on d1, but white simply takes with the pawn on e3. So now black has the time to pick up the rook. This check covers the queen. And I think black should have taken on h1. So how is the material here? Fairly balanced. The g6 pawn is hanging, and now look at the h7 square. Maybe pawn here and just queen in a little while. You just close the F file first, maybe with a pawn or something. Instead he picks up a pawn, but that leaves this first rank a bit weak. No, actually black has some momentum. And this will be a time scramble. Great. This is tricky to defend. Super tricky to defend. And opperwezen will have to give his queen. And it won't be enough because the pawn landed on g7, put even more pressure on that bishop. And Kleerkast back in the lead again. White has won all games. Oh, so you've been here there since 2015. Then you must know a lot more than me. I'm a rookie at this. So Sudu sacrifice, giving 2 pieces for 2 pawns, but he will pick up probably the piece on d4 if white takes back. Being on lead chess since 2015 is not a strong argument for knowing what you talk about. You have to do better than that. Sort of reminds me about a Swedish chess player whose brother was really strong. He was actually the European junior champion. And his little brother used to greet his opponents by saying something like, "Hi, my brother is the European champion." But he himself, he sucked. No, I won't be playing any candidates. In fact, I got a bit nervous when I was closing in on 2600 when I was playing a while back. And I'm so happy that I'm back on 2400. So now Kleerkast actually has some pressure on the dark squares. Maybe h5. Just to provoke the knight at f6, taking and giving the queen for 2 knights. Black noticing that white doesn't have anything but knights to interpose with. Great pressure here on the dark squares. Crossfire for the white king. And white fleeing to the light squares with all his pieces here. And black picking up an important knight for e3. Great move. And black is simply winning here, I think. Look at how safe the black king is. You might even consider taking g2 instead. It sure looks tempting. Okay, so he tries to get the queen with check. Well, yeah, I'm easily bored, and 5 minutes is probably too much time for me to play. I like to play bullet crazy house. That way I always have an excuse for my lousy play. So some great punches here by Kleerkast, hitting the king, hitting the bishop. Yeah, Lucas, 15 seconds. So maybe h5. Bring the rook into action as well. Maybe Kleerkast is just enjoying his position here. I must say that the way it developed is a bit surprising. I don't see anything for black after h5. Okay. f5 seems good enough. But it sure would have been nice to open the h file. Black has the chance to play h5 here again. Why not? So black is blocking the exits here. So threatening queen e3, and the position is crying for h5, I think. Okay, so blocking the e file exit, blocking from behind, and now it's close to mate. So black can pick up a few knights here maybe. Oh, knight g1 is the threat. What did Kleerkast do? All his pieces are buried now. This is buried. They're dead. And let's say king g7. No, what happened? Opperwezen, why did you overstep the time limit? Were you losing there? I didn't see anything. Was it lost? Was it lost in the end? Am I blind? Yes, it was lost, and I'm blind. But it wasn't easy to see. King here. And you could hope for a long castle and simply queen a8 mate, but apparently bishop f6 is winning. What is this? Because if you take with the king, you can do this. and it's mate in a few moves. For instance, king e5, and now the knight goes to f3. Okay, but you cannot afford to time out like this. Opperwezen, it's 4-2 Kleerkast. And what was the opening again? Another e4, e5. But this time it's a more straightforward theoretical line, I think. And Kleerkast has put a lot of pressure on Opperwezen in this match, so even though Opperwezen overstepped the time limit a couple of times, it's not like Kleerkast has been lucky or anything. He's put pressure on Opperwezen. And maybe this is the match where Opperwezen gets to say bye-bye to any chances of entering the World Champion finals. Now you see the value of having the queen defending here, because otherwise I could probably just take on g6, but now the queen is prepared to mend those light squares. White leaving the knight as a bait. Quite a few viewers. I'm so happy to see you here. So obviously Kleerkast has some compensation here, but Opperwezen seems to have everything under control. I was thinking maybe he could have traded and then played bishop at f4, because after a trade on f4 you could even give your queen and then you have knight at g3 tricks. So both kings having some problems here. Forcing white to waste some die here somewhere. Maybe you just go back with the knight. Okay. No, you go forward. He goes forward. This looks dangerous for black, I think. Knight at g5 might be a problem at some point. Although maybe black is safe here. Or maybe he's not. Black takes the opportunity to force white to spend one of his bishops down here in the passive position. And it looks like white doesn't have quite enough to finish black here, but still knight at g5 looks dangerous. And if you had a pawn for h7, you could place it there and then rook g8 check. So white simply takes on f4. That was a pawn hanging on f4. White wanted it, he gave his queen for it. But now the king is in trouble. He couldn't go to g2 because of pawn at f2. So white wants to play pawn h7 and rook g8. But maybe the king will just run. What if you take the queen here? Can you? So opperwezen found a line where he got to pick up the queen with check, and he keeps checking the white king, forcing him to go to squares where the checks will keep on happening. But is there a mate? Now pawn e1, yeah, and checkmate on e2. Nice finish there by opperwezen. Was down 4-3 against Kleerkast. Opperwezen choosing some other line, actually playing the kingside fianchetto himself. And this is interesting when you think about the psychology. How does Kleerkast play against his own opening? Yeah, very much so. The ambush predator. That's a nice way to describe it. So I have to rub my eyes because it looks like Kleerkast is playing white here, but he isn't. Opperwezen is using the Kleerkast opening. So white was hoping to trade this bishop for 2 pawns, probably. White just developing calmly. Hard to find constructive moves for black. And I wonder if white can take the opportunity to try to open things up. Maybe trade on c6 first and then e4. But it's double-edged to open the position. So he destroys the king's position and gets the piece back on g4. That looks like a trade that favors white. So after knight at e3, maybe knight at c4 was the problem. And now black has some very interesting holes here on the dark squares and the light squares to work with. Looks like this backfired a bit for white. Although this is threatening c6 and you threaten f7 as well. So do you go bishop e3 or bishop at e3? Knight at e3. One way of doing it would have been to simply play bishop at e3 and then pawn f2 and trade trades and another diag on e3. Super sharp right now. Black offering the queen, but white is weak here around the king. So maybe bishop at e3 now. And if pawn f2, you can pick up the knight. And this is probably what white needs to do. He needs to play pawn at f2, rook takes, and then take e3 and trade the queen and hope for some compensation here around the king, because I don't like this for white at all. Threatening mate on h2, threatening to pick up the knight. And when you take the knight, you threaten maybe knight here. Well, maybe it's not such a big threat, but pawn at f2 is also a possibility. I'm sure Kleerkast is thinking about pawn f2. It decides it's more pragmatic to simply pick up the knight. Yeah, g6 is weak now, especially after this fellow got blocked. So finally white got some attacking chances. And the white king is actually quite safe now. But on the other hand, white doesn't have much. He will need to pick up the rook, yeah, to allow rook at g7. So now white has some threats. Threatening the queen as well. And black sure would have wanted that pawn here much earlier. And white doesn't mind giving a rook for a pawn. Maybe the knight will come back. Why didn't he bring this back? So last few seconds here. Time scramble. White is super safe now. Surely white will take this. Yeah, check from a distance. Provoke the... bringing up... just gaining some pieces here for the attack. And black cannot take because of queen at g7. And... opperwezen has equalized a very, very sharp game. Where I think Kleerkast was better. Let's have a quick look. Bear with me. Games. Because here black is much better. Yeah. And indeed, bishop at e3 was better than knight at e3. And this looks like a blunder. And this is where I thought he would play pawn at f2, but this is yeah, pawn at f2 looks good. Because after this, it's not so clear anymore. White actually better here. And whoops, rook at h8. That would have been a beauty. Look at that. Okay. So black is better, black is better. I mean, white is better. And white won. Okay. Opperwezen. What is happening? e4, e5. And a very early pawn thrust. Giving white the opportunity to kick the black queen around a little bit, and here we are. Usually it's a good idea to trade the queen for, let's say, a couple of pieces, but now white has the chance to take on e5, and then it's a mating threat on d8, which will give him the time to bring the knight back or just go forward. Although the queen doesn't have anywhere to go. So what do you do here? It does give the queen for 2 pieces. I'm sure it will take on e5, threatening queen at d8 mate. And this looks good for white, I think. Maybe pawn b5. Wanting to get rid of the knight. Also, an idea like knight d5 might be strong. Especially if you can pick up this knight. So let's say if black takes, no, he cannot take on h4. Knight d5 looks natural. Although maybe knight d5, bishop at a5 and then pick up the knight. So maybe you need to return with the knight. So let's see if black can get his light pieces in order. Looks tempting maybe to just take g5. still could be tempting to take g5 and then just take back with the rook. Or maybe it's too dangerous. Because then you have ideas like rook takes here and knight takes f7. So what is happening here? At any point here, white might just leave its queen hanging and go for d takes c7. If black takes here, maybe Kleerkast will take on f4 and then knight at c7, pick up the rook. So taking here looks dubious, I think. I was thinking maybe queen g3 to hit the g5 pawn. And both players so low on time now. White bringing a lot of pawns here in the vicinity of the black king, threatening stuff like d7 check, and the black king needs to get out of there, but he doesn't have the time. And black just resigns. Wow. Opperwezen is not winning this match. He's down 4-5 before the last game. So the question is, will he tie the match or will Kleerkast take this? And for the first time, I think, we will see Opperwezen playing e4. Let's see what he has. No, it wasn't the first time. Sorry. Let's see what he has in store. So maybe this pawn advance here is a bit premature. I'm not sure, but black gets great development. Oh, is that why he resigned? Yeah. Queen at e8 mate. Yeah, it was all over. The final position must have been super one for white. So white doesn't want to castle kingside because of stuff like maybe knight takes d4, which would leave the h2 pawn hanging. Good for you, okay. So white would love to provoke pawn at d5, which is not the place where you would want to place that pawn. That would make the black position much too rigid. But what if white plays a3 and knight here, and then you blast the center open maybe. Now there's not a threat against the d4 pawn, so maybe you can get away with casting kingside here. The tactical tricks against h2 and d4 are not there anymore. At the moment, I should say. And now white looks like he has a healthy positional advantage. Nice pressure here on the dark squares. And white wants to increase the pressure on the dark squares even more by training this defender. The threat here is simply to take on e7 and then place the bishop on c5 when black recaptures. And if black takes on g5, then you can take with the knight and h7 is hanging. So what if you play bishop takes and bishop c5 here? Yeah, that's the question opperwezen was asking himself also. Looks really shaky here for black. And now you're threatening knight takes g7. And knight g7, it's over. Okay, 5-5. As some Swedish player would put it, draw is good for both players. I think one player here is happier than the other. But congratulations to both of you. No one lost this match. Congrats, opperwezen and Kleerkast. And thanks for playing a really enjoyable Crazy House Candidates match. And thanks for watching, all of you. And I will see you around. Bye bye.